In a corner of the vast land of the mortal world, there is one of the largest cultivation sects in this world, the Qingming Sword Sect. In this vast world, the fame of this sect is known to everyone. Not only does this sect produce a batch of old monster-level cultivators who have reached the nascent soul fusion or even tribulation crossing stages every few hundred years, but also, more than 3,000 years ago, there was a sect master who broke through the heavenly tribulation and ascended to immortality in broad daylight. Perhaps it was because of the protection of this immortal sect master. This sect has survived several calamities in the past thousands of years, and still stands firm, with its incense lasting. And this year, it was time for the Qingming Sword Sect's once in 20 years disciple selection event. People from several countries within the ancient state, and even from other big states, who were eager to seek the immortal fate, all gathered in the Hanging Sword Town at the foot of Qingming Mountain. But on that night, a catastrophe quietly descended on the Qingming Sword Sect without their knowledge. That night, in the towering Qingming Mountains, two third-generation disciples in blue robes near the mountain gate were boredly yawning, talking about the recent sect affairs and the beautiful senior and junior sisters, and imagining in their minds whether there would be their destined partner among the newcomers who would join the sect through the entrance ceremony tomorrow. Then, outside the Qingming Mountain Gate's protective formation, a sky full of dark clouds surged up without warning, and thunder snakes rolled in the dark clouds, rumbling thunder, and a human voice with an echo sounded in between. "Qingming, old man, I'm here for revenge. Rumble." But while they were chatting, a cloud of darkness quietly covered the Qingming Sword Sect above, and the bright moonlight that had hung for 1,000 years. The first thing that came was a strong sense of oppression that reached the extreme, just like the suffocating heat before the spring thunder, which almost instantly made these disciples guarding the mountain gate aware of the abnormality and uneasiness. The thunder became louder, lightning exploded, and the thunder snakes in the dark clouds gathered together, forming a thick thunder spear, and slammed into the Qingming Sword Sect's protective formation with a loud noise, causing the blue formation to shake violently. "Quick, report to the sect master." The disciples guarding the mountain were shaken to the ground by this violent tremor, and then the leader of the second-generation disciples in blue robes reacted quickly and got up from the ground, shouted this sentence to the other disciples, and then he ran to the big bell near the mountain gate, gathered his true essence, and used his fist as a hammer, and banged the big bell. But the uninvited guest outside the mountain gate obviously had no patience to wait for the sect master and elders to arrive. Seeing that the thunder spear failed to break through, the rolling dark clouds under his control suddenly turned into a huge claw that covered the sky, and slammed towards the Qingming Sword Sect's protective formation with a crisp sound. The protective formation that had stood for 1,000 years was like a soap bubble, and was crushed by the dark cloud giant. Claw. The formation engraved on the bell echoed the bell sound in the Qingming Mountains. At this moment, everyone in the Qingming Sword Sect heard this sound, and the second-generation disciples quickly directed their junior and senior brothers and sisters and their juniors to take refuge, and the first-generation disciples in red robes drove their flying swords, followed the elders and the sect master, and flew into the air. In an instant, countless sword lights flew and shuttled in the Qingming mountain peak, which was very beautiful. With a loud noise, the giant claw slapped in front of the mountain gate, smashing the Qingming mountain gate and the entire mountain road into ruins. It was also at this time that a blue sword light shot down from the clouds, turning into a blue flying sword, and inserted in front of the dark cloud giant claw. A figure flew down from the main peak of the Qingming Mountains, turning into a handsome figure in a white robe and a white cloak, standing in the air with his hands behind his back, looking at the dark clouds, and said coldly, "Who are you, ignorant junior? You haven't heard of the name of the Thunder Demon Lord?" The dark clouds kept rolling, as if brewing anger. "Well, I'm here today to settle accounts with Qingming, old man. Tell him to roll out." The dark clouds dispersed, and in the thunder clouds, a huge divine beast appeared, with a wolf head and a horse body, and 3 hooked long tails behind it, wrapped in black thunder. It was indeed the thunder beast recorded in the classics, the one that the ancestor sealed 3,000 years ago. King Ming ancestor had already ascended to immortality 3,000 years ago. The King Ming sect master in white robe and cloak, Zhuanzi, frowned and said, "If you want to find him, you should go to the immortal realm, instead of invading our King Ming sword sect." Ha ha ha. There was a loud laugh from the dark clouds. Ridiculous, ridiculous. This King Ming old man, he could actually ascend in broad daylight. Well, you are his disciples left behind. Today I will destroy your mountain gate first, and then I will go to the immortal realm to seek revenge. Seeing its true body, Zhuanzi frowned. Thinking of this, Zhuanzi moved his mind and connected his divine sense with one of his closed-door disciples. Go to Qixing Peak and find the ancestor uncle to help. A red-robed direct disciple who was driving a flying sword and sweeping the formation behind the elders heard the sect master's words, quickly agreed, and then turned into a stream of light, flying towards the most remote mountain peak in the Qingming Mountains. Seeing the disciple agree and leave, Zhuanzi relaxed a little bit, then he joined his sword fingers, and the blue flying sword under his feet turned into a stream of rainbow and flew up, circling around him. This thunder beast was of immortal beast bloodline, and originally had the strength equivalent to a Mahayana cultivator. After falling into the demonic path, its strength increased by 3 points, and it could almost compete with the heavenly immortals. He, a sect master at the peak of the soul fusion stage, was very confident, but he also knew that he was not a match for this thunder beast. But the Supreme Elder was in a life and death retreat, and once he was disturbed, his lifespan and cultivation would be affected, not to mention that he would first suffer a backlash of true essence, and be injured by the disturbance, and even if he came, it would be useless. If you want to flatten the Qingming sword sect, then you can only let Zhuanzi have a taste of the peerless cultivation of the Thunder Demon Senior. The story was divided into 2 parts. At the same time that the Qingming sect master Zhuanzi stopped the Thunder Demon Lord, the red-robed direct disciple also drove his flying sword and quickly arrived at the Qixing Peak. In a hurry, he didn't have time to show courtesy and walk up the mountain from the mountain road, but directly landed in the small courtyard near the mountain top. As soon as he landed, he knelt down on one knee, gathered his golden core true essence, and shouted, "The Qingming sword sect is under attack." The sect master sent the disciple to come. "Please, ancestor uncle, come out of the mountain to help." The sound echoed and resounded throughout the mountain peak. After a while, the door of a room in the courtyard was pushed open, and a lazy voice came out. "I know." Footsteps sounded, and then a figure appeared in front of the red-robed disciple. The disciple couldn't help his curiosity and looked up, only to see a handsome young man standing in front of him, with a fair complexion like a baby, but with white hair and eyebrows, his hair color like a 100-year-old old man. He looked lazy, and he didn't wear any clothes that represented the Qingming sword sect, but instead wore a tight-fitting white-hemmed cloth robe, with a pair of cloud shoes on his feet, and the iron sword hanging from his waist. He didn't look like a cultivator, but rather more like a swordsman. "Where is Zhuanzi now?" The white-haired young man walked to the front of the red-robed disciple and asked him. The red-robed disciple raised his hand and pointed in the direction of the mountain gate. "The sect master is fighting with someone in front of the mountain gate." "Oh, I see." But what shocked the disciple even more was the cultivation level of this legendary ancestor uncle. Key refining stage. He was only at the key refining stage. Holy shit. The red-robed disciple was stunned and speechless. This was almost the level that the martial artists at the foot of the mountain could reach, and with the strength of that thunder demon, let alone a key refining stage, even if a nascent soul-old monster went, it would only be sending food to it. The white-haired and white-eyebrowed ancestor uncle nodded, then squatted slightly, and the disciple suddenly felt a surge of true energy like a raging wave in his body. With a loud bang, the entire Qixing Peak shook, The ground under his feet cracked, and the red-robed disciple lost his balance and sat on the ground, while the figure of the ancestor uncle had already flown high into the clouds and jumped towards the direction of the mountain gate. At the Qingming Sword Sect's mountain gate, the disciples and elders looked up at the sky, and their sect master was fighting with the enemy in the clouds. In the sky, thunder snakes and sword lights shuttled endlessly, surging with huge energy, and each of the energy that leaked out could easily blow up a small hill. Hum. A few minutes later, in the clouds, there was a muffled hum. A white figure fell from the clouds and smashed on the big bell in front of the mountain gate, making a loud noise. The smoke and dust dispersed, and Zhuangzi had blood on the corner of his mouth, leaning on his life-bound flying sword, and slowly got up from the ground. He looked up at the sky, his expression solemn. Ha ha ha, after 1,000 years, the successor of Qingming Old Man, his strength is nothing more than that. The thunder beast came with thunder and clouds, and looked at Zhuangzi on the ground with a victorious posture. You have lost. You have exhausted your skills, Qingming Old Man's mountain gate. Today it will be destroyed here. It raised its head, and the spiral-shaped single horn on its head emitted thunder, communicating with the thunder clouds in the sky, brewing a terrifying move. But at this moment, a figure fell from the sky and kicked the thunder beast away. Bang! The thunder beast was caught off guard and was kicked out, falling on a small hill outside the Qingming mountain, collapsing the entire hill. Who are you? It roared angrily, rushing out of the smoke and dust, but saw a white-haired and white-eyebrowed teenager standing in front of Zhuangzi, looking at it leisurely. My name is Bai Qiuran. The teenager smiled gently and said, Today I will represent my grace teacher Qingming Taoist and have a meeting with you. Bai Qiuran, this is a name that only exists in the oldest sect roster of the Qingming Sword Sect. 3,000 years ago, the demons were rampant in the 10 lands of Jiuzhou, and the people were suffering. At that time, the major cultivation sect suffered heavy losses from the war with the barbaric demons, and had not recovered their vitality, and they were also like clay Buddhas crossing the river, unable to protect themselves. In such a chaotic world, a genius sword immortal with amazing talent emerged. He called himself Qingming, and with a green sword, he killed demons and eliminated evil, and restored peace to the 10 lands of Jiuzhou. Later, he came to the vicinity of Qingming Mountain in Guzhou, adopted a few talented disciples, and founded the Qingming Sword Sect. Bai Qiuran was one of the disciples who was adopted by Qingming Taoist after he saw him. He was an orphan picked up by Qingming Taoist from the battlefield. Before Qingming Taoist found him, he wandered on the battlefield, living by stripping the corpses of the dead. Because he was born with a heavenly spirit root level wood spirit root, he was seen by Qingming Taoist and taken to the mountain as a disciple, ranking 3rd. Bai Qiuran was very talented, and his rocks and wisdom were among the best among his fellow brothers and sisters. He started cultivating at the age of 10, and at the age of 12, he had already broken through the bottleneck of refining the body and condensing the key of the mortal body, gathered the 3 flowers on the top, and gathered the 5 key in the chest, and officially entered the path of cultivation. At that time, the entire Qingming Sword Sect, and even the cultivation world that had experienced the war and the demon calamity, and was in need of new blood, all placed high hopes on him, thinking that he would become the 2nd Qingming Taoist. And Bai Qiuran did not disappoint. He continued to work hard, and at the age of 17, he became the fastest in the same door, and also the fastest cultivator in the history of the cultivation world to reach the 10th level of key refining. His master Qingming Taoist was overjoyed, and even gave up the plan of retreating to deal with the heavenly tribulation, and personally came out to refine a furnace of superb foundation establishment pills for Bai Qiuran. With the foundation establishment pills bestowed by his master, and the blessings of his fellow sect members and senior friends from the cultivation world, Bai Qiuran closed himself in the night to break through the foundation establishment stage. He took the pill, sank his key to the dantian, and connected his mind to the meridians and bones in his body. Then, 3 days later, He broke through to the 11th level of the key refining stage. At that time, everyone didn't care much, thinking that Bai Qiuran was gifted, and even his master King Ming Taoist comforted Bai Qiuran, saying that there were strange people and strange things in ancient times, and the key refining stage had as many as 15 levels, and his later achievements were limitless. As a result, after 3,000 years of time, his master King Ming Taoist successfully crossed the tribulation and ascended to immortality in broad daylight. His eldest senior brother took over as the sect master and failed to cross the tribulation, and died, and even the youngest junior sister's 6th generation grandson successfully established the foundation and learned to ride the wind with the sword. And Bai Qiuran, as the disciple with the highest talent at that time, he successfully cultivated to the 66,664th level of the key refining stage. Until today, even the little brat he brought in when he went down the mountain to travel 700 years ago became the supreme elder, closed himself in a life and death retreat and prepared to challenge the heavenly tribulation. He was still working hard to successfully establish the foundation. The Thunder Beast stared at the teenager for a moment, and suddenly burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. What are you talking about? This is the funniest joke I've ever heard in my life. The Thunder Beast pointed at Bai Qiuran with its front hoof, laughing so hard that tears, snot and saliva came out. A mortal body of the key refining stage dared to claim to be the disciple of King Ming Old Man. Haha, you insult him far more than I can imagine. The laughter gradually subsided, and the Thunder Beast said in a low voice, "Get out of the way, I can spare you alive." "That won't do." Bai Qiuran smiled at the corner of his mouth, but his forehead had blue veins popping up. "What do you have against the key refining stage cultivators?" "Opinion." The Thunder Beast didn't want to answer this boring question, and seeing that Bai Qiuran didn't let go, it opened its mouth and sprayed out a thunder light, wanting to smash Bai Qiuran and Zhuanzi together. The main target of this thunder light was still on Zhuanzi, a small key refining stage cultivator. An existence that it could kill countless with a sneeze, didn't have the qualification to make it pay attention. Sect Master. Seeing the thunder light hit, the red-robed direct disciples in the sky screamed, but Zhuanzi was calm and composed, because he saw that Bai Qiuran in front of him had already drawn his sword. A mouthful of true qi like boiling sea surged from Bai Qiuran's sea of qi, igniting his sword blade, and the tip of the sword was blazing with fire, which was the most common basic martial skill for every cultivator when they started key refining. Blazing flame, slash. The fire soared into the sky, splitting the thunder light in half, and then continued unabated, like a hot knife cutting butter, cutting the Thunder Beast that was caught off guard, along with the mountains behind it, into two halves. The light faded, and Bai Qiuran casually threw the long sword that was burned into iron water by the blazing flame to the side, and then snorted coldly. "Don't look down on the key refining stage cultivators, okay? I'm very strong."